Welcome to Pastor Andrew's Inspirations. Today we will be talking about the biblical city of Nimrud. Nimrud is an ancient Assyrian city located 20 miles south of the city of Mosul and 3 miles south of the village of Selemiah in the Nineveh Plains in Upper Mesopotamia. It was a major Assyrian city between approximately 1350 and 610 BC. The city is located in a strategic position 6 miles north of the point that the river Tigris meets its tributary, the Great Zab. The city covered an area of 890 acres. The ruins of the city were found within 1,100 yards of the modern-day Assyrian village of Numana, or Numanea, in Nineveh Governorate, Iraq. The name Nimrud was recorded as the local name by Karsten Nabor in the mid-18th century. In the mid-19th century, biblical archaeologists proposed the biblical name of Kalu, based on a description of the travels of Nimrud in Genesis 10. Archaeological excavations at the site began in 1845 and were conducted at intervals between then and 1879, and then from 1949 onwards. Many important pieces were discovered, with most being moved to museums in Iraq and abroad. In 2013, the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council funded the Nimrud project to write the history of the city in ancient and modern times, to identify and record the dispersal history of artifacts from Nimrud, distributed amongst at least 76 museums worldwide, including 36 in the United States and 13 in the United Kingdom. In 2015, the terrorist organization Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant announced its intention to destroy the site because of its un-Islamic Assyrian nature. In March 2015, the Iraqi government reported that bulldozers were used to destroy excavated remains of the city. In November 2016, Iraqi forces retook the site, and later visitors also confirmed that around 90% of the excavated portion of the city had been completely destroyed. The ruins of Nimrud have remained guarded by Iraqi forces ever since. The Assyrian king Shalmaneser I built Nimrud into a major city during the Middle Assyrian Empire, 1365 to 1050 BC. However, the ancient city of Assur remained the capital of Assyria, as it had been since 3500 BC. The city gained fame when King Ashurnasirpal II of the Neo-Assyrian Empire made it his capital at the expense of Assur. He built a large palace and temples in the city, which had fallen into a degree of disrepair during the Bronze Age collapse of the mid-11th to mid-10th centuries BC. Thousands of men worked to build a 5-mile-long wall surrounding the city and a grand palace. There were many inscriptions carved into limestone, including one that said, "The Palace of Cedar, Cypress, Juniper, Boxwood, Mulberry, Pistachio Wood, and Tamarisk, for my royal dwelling and for my lordly pleasure for all time, I found therein beasts of the mountains and of the seas, of white limestone and alabaster, I fashioned and set them up on its gates. The inscriptions also described plunder stored at the palace: silver, gold, lead, copper, and iron, the spoil of my hand from the lands which I have brought under my sway. In great quantities I took and placed therein. The inscriptions also described great feasts he had to celebrate his conquests. However, his victims were horrified by his conquests. The text also said, "Many of the captives I have taken and burned in a fire. Many I took alive. From some I cut off their hands to the wrists. From others I cut off their noses, ears, and fingers. I put out the eyes of many of the soldiers. I turned their young men, women, and children to death." About a conquest in another vanquished city, he wrote, "I flayed the nobles, as many as rebelled, and I spread their skins out of the piles." He wanted the city to become the grandest and luxuriant in the empire. He created a zoo and botanical gardens in the city, which also featured exotic animals, trees, and flowers he had brought back from his military campaigns. A grand opening ceremony with festivities and an opulent banquet in 879 BC is described in an inscribed stele discovered during archaeological excavations. By 800 BC, Nimrud had grown to 75,000 inhabitants, making it the largest city in the world. King Ashurnasirpal's son, Shalmaneser III, continued where his father had left off. At Nimrud, he built a palace that far surpassed his father's. It was twice the size, and it covered an area of about 12 acres and included more than 200 rooms. He built the monument known as the Great Ziggurat and an associated temple. Nimrud remained the capital of the Assyrian Empire during the reigns of Shamshi Adad V, 822 BC, Adad Nirari III, 810 BC, Queen Semiramis, 809 BC, Adad Nirari III, 806 BC, Shalmaneser IV, 782 BC, Ashurdan III, 772 BC, Ashurnirari V, 754 BC, Tiglath-Pileser III, 745 BC, and finally Shalmaneser V, 726 to 723 BC. Tiglath-Pileser III, in particular, conducted major building works in the city, as well as introducing Eastern Aramaic as the lingua franca of the empire, whose dialects still endure among the Christian Assyrians of the region today. It remained a major city and a royal residence until the city was largely destroyed during the fall of the Assyrian Empire at the hands of an alliance of former subject peoples, including the Babylonians, Chaldeans, Medes, Persians, Scythians, and Sumerians, between 616 and 599 BC. Many of Nineveh's archaeological remains were transported to the major museums of the 19th century, including the British Museum and the Louvre. The name Nimrud, in connection with the site in Western writings, was first used in the travelogue of Karsten Niebuhr, who was in Mosul in March 1760. The site of Nimrud was visited by William Francis Ainsworth in 1837. The site was subsequently visited by James Phillips Fletcher in 1843. Initial excavations of Nimrud were conducted by Austin Henry Layard, working from 1845 to 1847 and from 1849 until 1851. Following Layard's departure, the work was handed over to Hormuz Rassam in 1853 to 54, and then William Loftus from 1854 to 55. After George Smith briefly worked on the site in 1873, and Rassam returned there from 1877 to 1879. Nimrud was left untouched for almost 60 years. A British School of Archaeology in Iraq team led by Max Malawan resumed digging at Nimrud in 1949. The work continued until 1963, with David Oakes becoming director in 1958, followed by Julian Orchard in 1963. Esarhaddon cylinder from Fort Shalmaneser at Nimrud. It was found in the city of Nimrud and was housed in the Iraqi Museum in Baghdad. Herbal Civilization Museum, Iraq's subsequent work was by the Directorate of Antiquities of the Republic of Iraq, 1956, 1959 to 60, 1969 to 78, and finally 1982 to 92. The Polish Center of Mediterranean Archaeological University of Warsaw, directed by Janusz Muszynski from 1974 to 76. Paolo Fiorini, 1987 to 89, with the Centro Ricerca Archeologique e Scavi di Torino, who concentrated mainly on Fort Shalmaneser, and John Curtis, 1989. In 1974, to his untimely death in 1976, Janusz Muszynski, the director of the Polish project with the permission of Iraqi excavation team, had the whole site documented on film, in slide film and black and white print film. Every relief that remained in situ, as well as the fallen, broken pieces that were distributed in the rooms across the site, were photographed. Muszynski also arranged with the architect of his project, Richard Sobolewski, to survey the site and record it in plan and in elevation. As a result, the entire relief compositions were reconstructed, taking into account the presumed location of the fragments that were scattered around the world. Excavations revealed remarkable bas reliefs, ivories, and sculptures. A statue of Ashurnasirpal II was found in an excellent state of preservation, as were colossal winged man-headed lions, weighing 9.1 tons to 27 tons each, guarding the palace entrance. The large number of inscriptions dealing with King Ashurnasirpal II provide more details about him and his reign than are known for any other ruler of this epoch. The palaces of Ashurnasirpal II, Shalmaneser III, and Tiglath-Pileser III have been located. Portions of the site have also been identified as temples to Ninurta and Enlil, a building assigned to Nabu, the god of writing and the arts, and as extensive fortifications. Nimrud has been one of the main sources of Assyrian sculpture, including the famous palace reliefs. Layard discovered more than half a dozen pairs of colossal guardian figures guarding palace entrances and doorways. These are lamassu, statues with a male human head, the body of a lion or bull, and wings. They have heads carved in the round, but the body at the side is in relief. They weigh up to 27 tons. The reliefs show scenes of hunting, warfare, ritual, and processions. The Nimrud ivories are a large group of ivory carvings, probably most mostly originally decorating furniture and other objects. They had been brought to Nimrud from several parts of the ancient Near East, and were in a palace, storeroom, and other locations. Another storeroom held the Nimrud bowls, about 120 large bronze bowls or plates, also imported. The treasure of Nimrud, unearthed in these excavations, is a collection of 613 pieces of gold jewelry and precious stones. It has survived the confusions and looting after the invasion of Iraq in 2003 in a bank vault, where it had been put away for 12 years and was rediscovered on June 5, 2003. A number of other artifacts considered important to biblical history were excavated from the site, such as the Nimrud tablet and the Nimrud slab. The bilingual Assyrian lion weights were imported to scholarly deduction of the history of the alphabet. Nimrod's various monuments had faced threats from exposure to the harsh elements of the Iraqi climate. Lack of proper protection and protective roofing meant that the ancient reliefs at the site were susceptible to erosion from wind-blown sand and strong seasonal rains. In mid-2014, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant occupied the area surrounding Nimrud. On March 5, 2015, Iraq announced that militants had bulldozed Nimrud and its archaeological site on the basis that they were blasphemous. By the time Nimrud was retaken, as we've heard before, around 90% of the excavated part of the city had been destroyed entirely. Every major structure had been damaged. The ziggurat of Nimrud had been flattened. Only a few scattered broken walls remained of the palace of Ashurbanipal II. The lamassu that once guarded its gates had been smashed and scattered across the landscapes. As of 2020, what remains of Nimrud is guarded by Iraqi soldiers and a few archaeologists, while weeds grow on the now mostly empty site. This is the biblical city of Nimrud. Adonai Nisi, the Lord is our banner. God's blessings be upon us all.